When new things are revealed to us, and we get to live under that morality, we don't want the state to impose the previous one. So we need Christianity to be protected from past Christianity if we think that we've gotten any better.
That's absolutely right. And I as you know, in the book I talk about the First Amendment as setting up a free marketplace for religion, and those market forces keep religion in America vibrant and salubrious.
Welcome back once again to If I'm Really Honest, where I seek truth without tribalism. It's a place where ignorance isn't punished, curiosity is rewarded, and conflict doesn't mean contempt. As always, I hope that I've brought you someone that you don't fully agree with, and I'm here, so we're already ahead of the game. Today I'm joined by historian and author Randall Balmer. In addition to our shared fascination with Christian and political history, we also share the random fact that both of our fathers were in the 1970s Christian blockbuster A Thief in the Night about the impending rapture. We'll get into that a little bit before we discuss his expertise, which is the rise and evolution of evangelicalism. And we'll discuss the church's misunderstanding of the separation of church and state. So now I give you Randall Balmer.
So both of our fathers were in that movie.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Let's get into that.
Okay. I'll take your.
Oh
cue.
no! I want to hear more about that. So obviously, like you've got a lot of books that I want to talk about. But yeah. So what role did that movie play in your life? Your dad was the bad guy, right? Like the pastor that he didn't get raptured. Is that right?
No. He was the good pastor.
Wait. Okay. Well, my dad was the good pastor. So my dad was the piano player.
Yeah, he was the youth pastor. Yeah,
I thought your dad was the one who was preaching and wasn't sincere and ended up not getting raptured. And
no, that was Russ Doughton, who was the executive producer.
Oh, okay.
He played that. No, my dad was the good preacher who went to the hospital and visited the guy who got bit by the cobra.
Snake. Yeah.
And actually the film was based on my father's Sunday night sermons at Westchester Free Church.
Yeah.
Don Thompson was my Sunday school teacher, and so that's where the whole film came from. It's my father's preaching on Sunday evening in Westchester Free Church.
Yeah. So how did that work out for him and for you, and how much of that changed over the years? And how much
for me? I can't say that I'm a premillennialist any longer, if I ever was, really. But my dad, he was very proud of that, and he saw it as a film that brought a lot of people to Christ, and he was very happy with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And what's your father doing now?
I don't know. Yeah. Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It went like that. So I haven't talked to him about 5 years. So, and last I heard, he's disowned me. So, we all. So
I'm sorry. I'm
sorry.
Thanks.
Oh
boy,
it's been 5 years. It's healing, I think, but
it's still.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean to make it weird. Sorry.
Well, clearly it is weird. And
yeah, it is. Yeah. It is weird. But I mean, relationships are weird. You stayed in Christianity, let's say, at least. You still consider yourself Christian.
No, absolutely. No, and there's a part of me that still struggles to identify myself as an evangelical, but for me, what disqualifies them, I would argue, is the politics over the last 40 years. I mean, I think that evangelicalism has defaulted both on the words of Jesus and the New Testament, as well as what I consider the noble legacy of 19th century and early 20th century evangelicalism, which took the part of those on the margins of society. And so I don't feel as though I've left evangelicalism. I feel as though evangelicalism has left me. Now, my particular expression of faith is much different from my childhood, and I have to say too, Jamin, that my father and I, probably wouldn't see eye to eye theologically. He's deceased now for more than 20 years, but I honor both his ministry and his memory, and he was I'm in trouble here. He was a person of deep and abiding faith, and my understanding of the faith, my expression of the faith, is different from his today, I think. But I honor him profoundly. So, just to finish out the question, I actually became an Episcopal priest a couple of decades ago. So that's how I found my expression for the faith.
Right. Okay. So, in what way is that different, or what was attractive about that to you?
Well, I have two kind of flippant answers to that question. One is that it was a reaction to the aesthetic deprivation of my childhood, but the second is that I grew tired of the cult of novelty, which I think defines so much of evangelicalism. That is to say, let's try something new, and I want to say, no, let's try something old. Let's connect with our heritage, with our past, certainly connect with the words of Jesus in the New Testament, but also, this rich heritage, the communion of the saints that goes down through the centuries, and that has expressed itself in various forms in terms of prayers and liturgies and understanding of the sacraments. I've become a sacramentalist. I believe that when I do the Eucharist as a priest, that the bread and wine of Holy Communion actually becomes the body and blood of Christ, even though it maintains the outward form of bread and wine. So I'm a sacramentalist in that sense. So that would be different from my father, certainly. But again, I honor him, and I remember him as a real champion of the faith, even though my understanding of the faith and his might be a little bit different.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and in the same spirit, like, I feel like if that was your view, the view of The Thief in the Night, like, if that represents your theology, the responsible thing to do is to make a movie and to tell as many people as you can.
Yeah.
Like, this is an emergency. It's an act of love, even though it's experienced as a traumatic experience for a lot of people who, then for decades wondered every time they couldn't find their parents whether or not they'd been raptured and were going to spend eternity in hell. Like, it had some negative consequences, but that says nothing about the intentions of the makers of the film.
Right. No, absolutely.
So,
and that applied to Don Thompson, the director of the film, who's really the guiding force behind the film, and he was sincere. He died a couple of years ago now too, and to the end, he was he thought that this was the right thing to do. And I asked him. I did a PBS documentary. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
no.
in the early 1990s, based on my book, Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory, and we interviewed Don for the book. For the movie, and I asked him about the criticism that he was scaring people into the kingdom of heaven, and he was unapologetic.
It thrills me when I go to bed at night and think that there are people still coming to Christ over that film. That makes me the richest man around. I would rather have that than have money in the bank, I hear stories. I go on trips. I've gone to Montana on speaking engagements. I've gone all over the country and had people, I don't know how they knew that I was the producer of the film or the director, but they'd come up to me in tears and say, my daughter was saved at this movie, and thank you. And I always just say, give God the glory, because I'm just a tool. I was just a tool.
How do people who don't understand these apocalyptic themes react?
There are some, obviously, who see the film and they'll laugh at it, and their hearts are hard, and to them it's just fantasy, and nothing happens. To those who are warm to it, they'll think about it. Some of them have gone home at midnight, some at 3 o'clock in the morning. Some, I've heard months later, have called pastors and said, I just can't get this out of my mind. I think that's the Spirit working in them and using that as a tool.
A lot of people seeing these prophecy films about apocalyptic judgment would say that these films are gruesome and they're scary. How do you deal with that criticism?
I didn't try to frighten somebody just for the sake of scaring them. a lot of comments came back like, why do you do this? Why do you scare us? It's not right. And then in Distant Thunder, I put it in the film, a line where this one of the characters, Patty Dunning, said, why didn't you tell this? Why didn't you tell us this? And he said, I didn't want to scare you. She said, I would have rather been scared into heaven than not go at all. And so I think it's okay to do that. I felt led of the Spirit to do that. And some people, you've got to hit them over the head. But once they were scared and frightened and got to thinking about this, then they came into a knowledge, many of them, a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, into a walking relationship with Him. And so, yeah, there was a lot of that went on. But that's okay.
He was utterly sincere about his faith, as was my father.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like if it was, if it was Coke or Pepsi or Apple or something like that, and they were, which do try to scare you into, like, there's all kinds of brands that try to scare you into their thing, and they're doing it insincerely, and that's evil. But like, if you're just really trying to rescue people that you really believe are in danger, I don't see how those motives can be impugned, even if, the result isn't necessarily healthy in every case.
I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. So, so the film, it's, as you probably know, Time Magazine called it a church basement classic, and it has enduring appeal for a lot of people, and as you say, it still scares a lot of people. A lot of people were quite profoundly affected, maybe not in a good way.
Yeah. Well, and maybe this is part of your disagreement with them. Like I feel like in a lot of cases it drove people away from Christianity, because anytime you have the extremism, it's gonna make people feel like, oh, if this represents Christianity, then I know that one's not for me, and they throw it away. So I feel like that's a lot of the stories that I hear from people who still haven't been raptured yet, and yet came to Christianity through that movie. Like it kind of sets up a ticking time bomb of faith for a lot of people.
It does, yeah. And, what happens when Jesus doesn't return? I mean, we just had this, 2 weeks ago with this guy out in South Africa or whatever, said Jesus will be returning on, I don't know, September or whatever it was. And, then what happens to the followers? But this has been a recurrent theme throughout church history. The most famous example was William Miller back in the 1840s, who predicted that Jesus would return on October 22nd, 1844. And then Jesus didn't show up, and this is known as the Great Disappointment.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm surprised how quickly history is forgotten. Like every time the rapture is, like it's taken seriously each time, and I don't know how we do that. Like I really literally can't wrap my brain around it. If you're young, I understand. If this is your first time, like if this is the first time that someone's told you this is the most important election ever, you're probably going to believe it. But after you've been here for 20 elections in a row, it's so I don't know how we're doing that. It seems to be not young people who are attaching onto these things. How do they do that?
Well, Americans are very poor at history, and that's one of the reasons I'm a historian. And I argue with the importance of history. So, when this latest thing about the second coming of Jesus occurred, I referred people back to the early 1990s. There was a group called Mission for the Coming Days, which just said that Jesus was going to return on October something, I think 1992, I forget which, maybe 1991, I forget which year. Again, the larger event was back in the 1840s, but there have been people making these predictions all along. But as you noted, because we don't understand history, we don't appreciate history, then people don't have that frame of reference. And that's too bad.
I mean, even my family was pretty extremist. Like we believed that truly any day, like it might be 5 minutes from now, every 5 minutes was like the last 5 minutes on the planet. And yet when there was pamphlets being handed out that, like, the end of the world is coming this Thursday, even my parents were like, nobody knows the time of the day. Like if he's going to come back, I now know one date and one time that it's not going to be, because he's not going to accidentally line up with this guy. So it's interesting.
No, that's right. That's right. And I grew up the same way. I mean, I was fearful. I mean, I may go to sleep tonight and not be here tomorrow, and or if I am here, then it's really bad news because that's then
Yes.
I'm part of the tribulation and all that stuff. So, but it's I think it's such a distortion of what those apocalyptic writings were all about. And maybe we don't want to go down this trail, but I view the book of Revelation as comfort to the early Christians, an assurance that God would eventually avenge their sufferings, that justice would eventually prevail. And I don't think it was meant to be parsed out into who's the Antichrist and who are the many-headed dragons and the vials of judgment and all this stuff. I just don't think that was the real purpose of the book of Revelation. And I hasten to add, I'm not a biblical scholar, so you
Sure.
shouldn't take my word for it, but that's my own view of it. And the premillennialists jumped all over this and said that this is the way to understand the imminent end of history. And what I find fascinating between the time that film was made and again, we're talking about a film called A Thief in the Night that was produced in 1972 that featured both of our fathers in the film, talking about the return of Jesus and the tribulation. What I find fascinating is that evangelicals have changed on this issue over the last 40, 50 years. That is to say, when I was growing up, and maybe you too, the mantra was, Lord, come quickly, right? We were expecting Jesus to return at any time.
I could play the hymns right now. Yeah.
Exactly, right. Yeah, exactly. And now as I look around, what I hear is, Lord, take your time. We're doing fine. We've accrued all of this political and cultural influence. We've moved to the suburbs. The kids are going to good schools. The 401k looks pretty healthy. We're doing fine here. So I don't hear the same sort of urgency about Jesus coming back to earth that I remember from my childhood.
I can definitely relate to that. So then, I feel like it must be true that because you're talking about how evangelicalism has changed over the last 40 years. I feel like if we go to 1968 evangelicalism, that the same message is present in some of the pulpits of like, we're so corrupt, we need to be like it was a second ago, or 40 years ago, or back in the good old days. Like when were the good old days? What's gone wrong with evangelicalism? When was it better?
Wait, in my judgment, when it was better? Well,
Yes,
in my judgment, it was much better in the antebellum period when evangelicals cared about social reform and caring for those on the margins of society. But I think you raise a good point. One of the very powerful motivators behind the religious right is this kind of overwhelming sense of nostalgia, and you see it. I wrote a book recently called Saving Faith, How American Christianity Can Reclaim Its Prophetic Voice. And I talked briefly about this. The allure of nostalgia, as you say, is always the era just
right
prior to where we are now. But for the religious right, it was the big draw was the 1950s, with the sitcoms, Ozzie and Harriet and Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver and that sort of thing. But I think you see it in one index is the flood of visitors to Mount Airy, North Carolina, which is considered kind of the birthplace or the inspiration for the Andy Griffith Show, right?
Okay.
And I mean, you have visitors flocking to Mount Airy, North Carolina, to try to recapture the 1950s aura. Well, let's think about the 1950s for a moment. Yes, for white Protestants, it was not a bad time, I suppose. Post-war prosperity, people moving to Levittown and the suburbs, and taking in their share of the American dream. But let's remember also that much of that was supported by the subordination of women who were not in the workforce, who were making it possible for their husbands to become corporate executives or part of the whole corporate machine. And also, let's talk about minorities, Catholics who are beginning to come of age because of the GI Bill allowed the sons of Catholic immigrants to go to college and become upwardly mobile. But they were not fully integrated into the mainstream of American culture in the 1950s. And in particular, let's think about people of color, not only African Americans, but Native Americans and Hispanic Americans and so forth. The 50s for them was not a golden age, I think it's fair to say.
Well, it's just that the lack of the context of the time, it seems to me, that makes that so attractive. Like, if you just reworded it instead of saying 1950s morality, you said we know when it was really best was right before civil rights. Like right. It's the same sentence, but it just sounds a little worse. When we were really best off is right before we freed the slaves. Like right. Except for the slavery thing, obviously we would change that. But right before that was the best time. Like.
Well, and you've got some people on the religious right who are saying are explicit about that. This character out in Moscow, Idaho, Doug Wilson, thinks that slavery was a golden age.
There were specific roles for blacks and whites, and each knew their place, as it were. But what is often overlooked is the high level of interaction between the races, which was a common and everyday experience. Slavery as it existed in the South was not an adversarial relationship with pervasive racial animosity. Because of its dominantly patriarchal character, it was a relationship based upon mutual affection and confidence. There has never been a multiracial society which has existed with such mutual intimacy and harmony in the history of the world. The credit for this must go to the predominance of Christianity.
And, the governor of Florida thinks that slavery taught African Americans, good professional skills or whatever it is. I mean, it's just,
I haven't heard any of that. That's terrifying.
Yeah, well, don't.
That's why I stay out of the news right there. Man, it's hard for me. So I do stay out of the news, and I have a really hard time connecting with the and I want to not say the word Trump or MAGA as much as possible. But I feel like the "Make America Great Again" thing, like that phrase, I thought I understood. Oh, we mean the morality of the 1950s and how we felt about God, but not any of the bad stuff. Like there were good things back there that we've thrown away, and some good things that we've gained, and we want to keep the good stuff and throw away the bad. Like it seemed reasonable to me. The movement, I can't connect with it. Like I literally have a hard time believing that there's someone in Florida saying what you're saying.
The governor.
I can't. I want to believe that that's like a misquote or something. Like I don't know how they get there. What would you like to see in the best world, in the best timeline here? What happens with America and evangelicalism, either separately or together?
Well, for evangelicals, and this is what I've been trying to do for the last couple of decades of my career and my life, is to persuade evangelicals to reconnect with the words of Jesus, to reconnect with the New Testament. And, if I wanted to be more specific about that, I'd ask them to start with the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Matthew 25. Care for the widows and orphans. Heal the sick. Treat the foreigner as one of your own. It seems to me that has some bearing on immigration policy. Borders are tricky things. I understand that. National sovereignty is an issue, but it seems to me that if these are people who claim to be taking the Bible seriously, that they should take the Bible seriously. And particularly when Jesus asks his followers to care for the least of these, I'm not sure how that squares with depriving citizens of health care. It's just, maybe I'm unenlightened, but it seems on the face of it that has some relevance. So I would like to have evangelicals reconnect with the words of Jesus, but I'd also want them to reconnect, as I suggested earlier, with their own history, with their own past, and recognize that evangelicals, particularly in the 19th century, but even into the early part of the 20th century, were very much concerned about issues like public education, because they recognized that was the way for those on the lower rungs of society to become upwardly mobile. And to join the middle class, essentially, to be concerned about issues like prison reform, as evangelicals in the 19th century were, to be concerned about peace and the elimination of violence. I've even run across a reference to an evangelical gun control organization in the antebellum period, in the early part of the 19th century. I'd like evangelicals to reconnect with their predecessors, their evangelical forebears, in advocating for women's equality. That would be my goal for evangelicals. And as I said, I've spent the last several decades of my life trying to make that case. And you can see how resoundingly successful I've been in this campaign. As for the nation, I have no interest in seeing making America great again. I would like to see making America good again. And again, I'm flummoxed by this white evangelical embrace of Donald Trump. I know you didn't want me to say the word, but I did.
You can. I just don't. I prefer not to cuss on my podcast.
One of the things was drilled into me when I was growing up, and I expect maybe you too, is integrity and telling the truth. Lying was, a cardinal sin in my household, my family growing up. And then I look at let's put it this way, the current president's first term in office, where independent sources computed that he had made 30,573 false or misleading statements in a 4-year term. I'm going to say that again. 30,573 false or misleading statements. That to me is staggering. So somehow we've got to get beyond that. And in terms of reclaiming the nation, I'm an optimist. I don't easily give in to despair. But what makes me really worried, frankly, maybe even more than the executive at this moment, it's the Supreme Court. I wish the Supreme Court had half as much deference for the First Amendment as it does for the Second Amendment. I think that the First Amendment, and in fact, I just wrote a book with that title, the First Amendment is, quote, America's best idea. The separation of church and state is America's best idea because it satisfied both the founders in trying to keep religious factionalism from disrupting the functions of government, but also protected the faith from too close an association with the state. And I'm going on here, and I apologize, but I'll try to wrap it up quickly.
This is what we're here for. I appreciate it.
If you look, as a historian, look back at the origins of this notion of the separation of church and state, probably the earliest important spokesperson for this was Roger Williams, who's the founder of the Baptist tradition in America. Let's remember this, the Baptist tradition in America. And he advocated protecting the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world by means of a wall of separation. Now, I think in the 21st century, we've kind of lost sight of the power of that metaphor.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize that Roger Williams and his contemporaries, as I like to say, were not members of the Sierra Club. That is to say, they didn't share our romantic notions about wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
For them, wilderness was a place of darkness where evil lurked. So when he talks about protecting the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world by means of a wall of separation, his primary concern was to protect the integrity of the faith from too close an association with the state. And I think that's the dimension on this whole argument that most people miss. So when I talk about the First Amendment as America's best idea, the separation of church and state, I'm equally talking about the protecting the government from religious contestation, but also, and even more important perhaps, protecting the faith from too close an association with the state.
It seems obvious to me, and reinforced after reading your book, the separation of church and state, even though that technical phrase doesn't, exist in the First Amendment, but
we can talk
the
about
idea,
that.
Well, yeah, right, and you do in your book very well. So,
right.
But like that separation is what allows Christianity to exist,
absolutely, and to flourish.
It's not like the atheists are the ones that win if we separate church and state. Like Christianity, I don't even know how to say it. The Christianity of our founding fathers is not the Christianity that any modern Christian wants to live under. So
right.
we don't want at any point in this, and I'm going to use the word evolution here, the evolution of evangelicalism, or I guess we would call them what's it called when God reveals the next? I'm going to remember as soon as there we go. Thank you.
Dispensation. Right?
Yes,
right.
That's a nicer word than evolution. When we new things are revealed to us, and we get to live under that morality, we don't want the state to impose the previous one. So we need Christianity to be protected from past Christianity if we think that we've gotten any better.
That's absolutely right. And I as you know, in the book I talk about the First Amendment as setting up a free marketplace for religion, and those market forces keep religion in America vibrant and salubrious compared to any other country, certainly in the West. And, we can have a longer conversation about the quality of religious life in America. But in terms of this marketplace, it's a very vibrant place. And it's all because of the separation of church and state.
Well, and speaking of the wilderness and the garden, it feels like at the moment, the wilderness has invited the garden to take over the wilderness. But when you don't have that wall anymore, it's just a matter of time until the wilderness then infects the garden, and then you don't have one anymore.
That's right. Oh, that's right. No, the example I sometimes use is the Alabama Ten Commandments case back in 2001 when the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, Roy Moore, installed a granite monument in the lobby of the Judicial Building in Montgomery, emblazoned with the Ten Commandments, and at the same time said that there would be no other religious representation in that space, only the Ten Commandments. Well, I happen to be one of the expert witnesses in that case. And when Judge Myron Thompson, ruled correctly that the monument in that space represented a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And he ordered the monument removed. One of the protesters screamed, "Get your hands off my God." Now, one of those commandments talks about graven images, right?
Oops.
And I think that's precisely Roger Williams' point about protecting the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world. In this case, protecting the faith from being trivialized or fetishized. Mm-hmm. And I that's an important lesson, and people need to know about this.
Yeah. Now, use
people
that word.
Of faith.
Right. Yeah. Use that word fetishized a lot in the book. Can you talk more about exactly what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, turning the Ten Commandments into a monument that you place in a public space, it trivializes it. Yeah, the Ten Commandments should be written on our hearts, right? If you take that seriously. And by the way, if we're talking about Christian nationalism here, why the Ten Commandments? Why not the Beatitudes?
That's my argument. Right. Yes. Uh-huh.
I mean, it seems to me they're missing the mark.
Well, I think most people who are the biggest fans of the Ten Commandments don't know them. They must not, because that's not that's not the set you would go with.
No, that's right. Well, and I don't know if you remember that, but Stephen Colbert in his previous incarnation is this is the Bill O'Reilly person. Yeah. He visited with a member of Congress who was had put it forward legislation to have the Ten Commandments in, I don't know, public places, in schools or wherever, whatever they're doing now in Texas and Louisiana and so forth. And then so Colbert asked, now remind me, what are the Ten Commandments? The poor guy couldn't name it.
Right.
I think he got "Thou shalt not kill," and that's all he could come up with.
Well, that's one of the best ones in there. That's one of the ones that still applies.
Good place to start.
You co-sponsored a bill requiring the display of the Ten Commandments in the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
What are the Ten Commandments?
What are all of them? Don't murder. Don't lie. Don't steal. I can't name them all.
Congressman, thank you for taking time away from keeping the Sabbath day holy to talk to me.
Anytime, Stephen.
Yeah. Yikes. All right. Well, so then you said you are optimistic about America and about evangelicalism. So you said what you hope would happen. What do you think actually will happen if you had to put money down?
Well, we have to get through the next 3 years, and I don't say that lightly. I think it's going to be a real challenge, especially with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court abetting the executive all along the way. It makes me fearful. It really does. But we have term limits in place. Apparently, he's looking to subvert them in some way. But and no one lives forever, including me, of course. So I may not see it, but I think what makes me optimistic about America and makes me a patriot. I consider myself a patriot, not in the sense of waving flags and wearing silly red caps, but what makes me patriotic is my sense that over the long course of American history, Americans have always sought to live into the ideals that are encoded into our charter documents. Now, I hasten to add that we've been far too slow to do so. For people of color, certainly slavery has to figure into that conversation, but also with women, providing equality. But over the long arc of American history, we have tried to live into those ideals, again, imperfectly and far too slowly. I think we're at a roadblock right now, to be honest. But I'm confident we'll come out on the other side. I'm reasonably confident we'll come out on the other side and continue to live into those ideals. And one of those ideals, as a principle in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and it's really quite remarkable, is that the founders forswore majoritarianism. That is to say, they sought to make it impossible for a majority to impose its will on a minority. Again, that is under attack these days, and I won't deny that. But to me, that's one of the really beautiful principles behind the American experiment. The notion that just because a majority of Americans claim to be Christian, and again, we can We can
Right.
debate the quality of that claim, but nevertheless, just because a majority of Americans claim to be Christian doesn't mean that they can impose their Christian ideals on everyone else. Again, that principle is under stress at the moment. I'm not going to deny that for a minute, but as I look toward the future, and you've asked me to do that, that is what makes me optimistic, is that we can hold on to that principle.
Well, and so that you said we've not done it quickly enough, and I agree. I wish we would have gotten to where we are sooner, but also, I mean, and this is really uncomfortable as a white male saying this, but for an institution that lasted for millennia, but since the beginning of time, to have a nation spring up and then be able to undo that, or at least really start to undo it within a couple hundred years, like that seems crazy quick to me. And so like I feel optimistic because of how quickly we move, even though, again, listen, this is not the right face to be saying these words.
No, I understand.
But
right.
it feels like we actually move pretty quickly, and that's frequently the complaint, is that we're moving too quickly. Like if I dip into the religious zeitgeist, it's all complaints about how like we got to conserve things and things are moving too quickly. And then we look back and we're like, oh, but all the things that changed, I wish we would have changed those faster. Like this is the perfect thing, except for all the the chaos that's making me uncomfortable at the moment. But so it feels fast to me. And also I feel like all of the words that are currently used, like we're talking about the rights of women, for example, like. If you go back to, and you're the historian, not me, I'm the piano teacher, so correct me here. But I feel like if you go back to that time when that was hotly debated, the Christian realm, if there was a consensus, would say this is we need to hold on to the Christian principles of like the man's place and in the woman's place, and this is from God. So this thing can't change. We should have changed slavery. Yeah, that should have happened sooner. But this one can't change. And I feel like that theme keeps coming up of like, we need to keep whatever the thing is. We need to keep this one the way that I want it, according to God and Scripture.
Yeah, but is it? It would be my response to that. And as you probably know, one of my books is a biography of Jimmy Carter, and one of the things that Carter pointed out, I thought really very, very astutely, is that when he was battling with the Southern Baptist Convention after the conservative takeover in 1979, he said, yeah, sure, it's possible to go through the scriptures and cherry pick verses that would seem to call for the subordination of women. But, let's look at the larger picture. First of all, Paul in Galatians 3, right? It talks about in Christ there's neither male nor female, slave nor free, Jew nor Greek. Somehow that gets lost in this conversation, and I don't think it should be lost in this conversation. But also, look at the way Jesus treated women. Jesus did not condescend to women, and this is even in the context of a very patriarchal society in first century Palestine. He did not. He treated them as worthy individuals, even as equals. I would argue, and so much of the trouble within evangelicalism, I think we're back to evangelicalism now, I guess, but is the kind of pinched proof text readings of the scriptures, missing the forest for the trees, right? Or to use another metaphor, I think we need to take the 40,000-foot view here and say, what is Jesus saying? What is Jesus showing us by the way he treated women? I think it's very different from what we're hearing out of conservative evangelicals these days.
Can you give me a more specific definition of evangelicals?
Oh, sure. I I use a three-part definition.
Cool.
A lot of scholars try to make it real complicated, and I don't think that serves any purpose. I think an evangelical is somebody who takes the Bible seriously as God's revelation to humanity. Leads many of them to be biblical literalists, although I often qualify by saying I think most are what I would call they engage in what I call the ruse of selective literalism when it comes to the Bible. Second, an evangelical is somebody who believes in the centrality of a conversion or a born again experience. The typical reference for that would be the third chapter of John in the New Testament, when Nicodemus, a Jewish leader, visits Jesus by night because he doesn't want to be seen with Jesus in the daytime. And he asks Jesus how he, Nicodemus, can enter the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus replies, "You must be born again," or in some translations, "born from above." So for evangelicals, this is often, or typically, a dateable moment when they turn away from their past and embrace Jesus as their Savior. And the third definition is an evangelical takes seriously the mandate to bring others into the faith, to preach the gospel. Although, again, I qualify that typically by saying that evangelicals tend to hire professionals to do it for them rather than doing it themselves. So missionaries, youth pastors, evangelism ministers, and the staff of a mega church and so forth. But so that's my three-part definition. The Bible is God's revelation to humanity, centrality of a conversion experience, and then the taking seriously the mandate to bring others into the faith. So that's my definition.
Okay, so then speaking to those people in 2016, how did that go? Why did you feel the motivation to write another book in the same vein in 2023, and how did your message change?
Okay, remind me what was the 2016 book?
Yeah.
Bad Faith?
And maybe they're not. The only book of yours that I read all the way through was the most recent one, the America's Best Idea. So I'm just going based on the titles and the summaries. There was one called Evangelicalism in America. Yeah, that was 2016, and then there was one called your Saving Faith book, How American Christianity.
Yeah, actually, probably the two that would be kind of most linked would be Bad Faith and Saving Faith. So let me talk about that. Bad Faith, Race and the Rise of the Religious Right. I really went back to, well, I'll give you the backstory on it. Politico asked me back in 2014 to write an article about the origins of the religious right. And that article, apparently, at least at one time, it was the most popular article they'd ever published. And I kept getting phone calls about this and inquiries. And so, and some people were asking, well, what are the references for it? How come you didn't provide footnotes? Well, it was a magazine article, which is why I didn't include footnotes. Right. So what I decided to do was to really update that article with more research I had done on the issue of the origins of the religious right, and then add all these footnotes so people can see the references for themselves. And so it's copiously footnoted, but it's a very small volume. And the argument I was making and continue to make is that contrary to popular perception, the religious right in the 1970s did not come out of a concern about abortion.
I just wanted to interrupt and note really quickly that I got this exactly, perfectly, 100% wrong about Randall Balmer, which is why in my abortion video, the image of his book is now blurred out. I didn't read the book. I just trusted the snippets that I had heard, and they led me in exactly the wrong direction. So here we have a reminder, both for me and for Team Possibly Wrong. First of all, you can't research all the snippets that you encounter, so you have to hold lightly the things which you only know lightly, and be open to the possibility of learning new information about even the things that we hold tightly. And number 2, Jamin doesn't know what he's talking about. But even piano teachers are right sometimes. So rather than trusting the people that you like and disregarding the people you disrespect, maybe it's a good idea to be open to good ideas no matter their source, and to be skeptical even with your favorite idols. And maybe as a side point, if you want to learn more about history, maybe ask a historian like Randall Balmer. And if you want to know about how to use the diminished whole tone scale over an altered dominant chord, well then I'm your guy.
abortion had nothing to do with the origins of the religious right. And, again, I say that without fear of contradiction after more years of doing research than I care to tally. The religious right started as a defense of racial segregation at places like Bob Jones University and various segregation academies, including Jerry Falwell's Lynchburg Christian Academy in Lynchburg, Virginia. So that was the argument behind saving faith, saying, look, we need to move beyond what I call the abortion myth. The abortion myth is the fiction that evangelicals became politically active and mobilized in the 1970s in response to Roe v. Wade. It's absolutely not true. Jerry Falwell, by his own admission, did not preach his first anti-abortion sermon until February 26th, 1978. That's more than 5 years after the Roe v. Wade decision. When I can keep going. I'll stop in a minute, but just more evidence. 1971, the Southern Baptist Convention, not exactly a redoubt of conservatism, of liberalism, passed a resolution calling for the legalization of abortion, which they reaffirmed in 1974, a year after Roe v. Wade, and again in 1976. W.A. Criswell, pastor of First Baptist Church in Dallas, past president of the Southern Baptist Convention, when the Roe v. Wade decision was handed down, he applauded the Roe v. Wade decision. So abortion had nothing to do with the rise of the religious right. And that was the argument in Bad Faith. So Saving Faith, which I published, I don't know what, last year or the year before, I forget what.
I'm sorry, real quick, just to clarify, you're saying that in Bad Faith, the argument was that abortion was not the main issue. Gotcha. Okay.
Right. And the implications of the repercussions from that finding, it suggests that the origins of this movement were not exactly as pristine and pure motives as they want you to believe.
Right.
It just simply wasn't. And just to add a footnote, abortion was cobbled into the movement really by accident, and I explain how that happened as well in that book. It's a very slim book called Bad Faith: Race and the Rise of the Religious Right. And then a couple of years ago, I wrote another slim volume called Saving Faith: How American Christianity Can Reclaim Its Prophetic Voice. So if in many ways Bad Faith was sort of deconstructing the movement, I wanted to offer a more positive perspective in Saving Faith, in which I was saying, look, you have the origins of this movement, as I had established before, but how can we move beyond it? What is the kind of positive perspective? And was arguing ultimately that American evangelicals need to recover their prophetic voice, which entails, as we've talked about earlier, reaffiliating with the words of Jesus, but also claiming their own history as social reformers in the mold of those who went before them in the 19th century. So that's what Saving Faith is about. So Bad Faith and Saving Faith. Two different publishers, by the way, but similar books. They're actually the same size, it turns out.
One thing I loved about America's Best Idea is like it is so dense, and yet it's not huge. Like it's very readable. It's extremely well edited, well written, because it's not it's short, but there's a lot in there. So it doesn't a lot of, I feel like a lot of authors feel like it's not a legitimate book until they fill out a certain page number or page count. So I really appreciate that. Just sticking with the new information.
Yeah. I have written big books, but last several have been fairly small.
Yeah. Well, and a big book is great as long as it's continuing to push the narrative forward. It's the ones I feel like you're filling pages here for your own ego that are irritating. Okay, so then real quick here before we finish up, I was surprised to hear in America's Best Idea you're in favor of the tax-exempt status for churches. Do I understand that correctly?
I am. I'm not doctrinaire about it, but I think the founders recognized the virtue of voluntary associations, and they wanted to encourage that. And I think that religious organizations, I think there's an argument to be made that they should have tax exemption. Now, I'm working on my current project. I'm writing a biography of a man named Mark Hatfield, and you're probably too young to know that name, but Mark Hatfield was a Republican senator from Oregon, elected to the Senate in 1966 and served for 30 years. He was an evangelical, a Baptist, and probably the last liberal Republican in America. An extraordinary man. I got to know him a little bit toward the end of his career personally, and he was just a wonderful, godly man. I don't use that adjective very often to describe anyone, but he really was. And he proposed that religious organizations should not have tax exemption. And I think he made a very important argument. And he was saying that, look, if people really believe in the virtue of these organizations and what they do, what they support, they'll continue to support them even without a tax deduction. Now, that was all in the context. He introduced legislation for something he calls simpliform. The idea was to simplify the tax code so that, the phrase at the time was you'd be able to file your taxes on a postcard.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, we've never gotten to that point, obviously, but so he thought, and again, somebody I admire greatly, but he thought that the IRS should eliminate the tax exemption for religious organizations.
Yeah. Okay. But you feel like it's beneficial overall more than it is.
Yeah. I think there's an argument to me that it's useful. Now, it raises a larger question, and you read about it in the book, and that's the Johnson Amendment that prohibits these tax-exempt organizations from endorsing political candidates or opposing political candidates. And that is very much under fire by the Trump administration. He's pledged to do away with the Johnson Amendment. And I think that would be a colossally bad idea to allow religious organizations to make political endorsements. Just to play this out, suppose I had disposable income of, $3-4 million, which I don't worry about that. And I went to a megachurch pastor and said, listen, I bet you guys could use some money. All I ask in return is that you say nice things about J.D. Vance or Josh Shapiro or somebody every week between now and the 2028 election. Well, how is that not a form of money laundering, first of all? That is to say, I get a tax deduction for, $3 million. Not bad. Right. And you have then a situation where you have these religious organizations essentially selling themselves to the highest bidder. It's money laundering, it seems to me.
Yeah.
So I think it's a colossally bad idea. And then returning to something we just talked about, I think what we need more than ever right now from religious organizations, churches, and other groups is we need a prophetic voice talking to us about where we are as a society and where we're going as a society, and invoking the words and the warnings of these crusty new Hebrew Bible prophets like Amos and Jeremiah. And if you have various political interests feeding vast sums of money into these churches and these mega church pastors, for example, you're not going to hear a prophetic voice, it seems to me. And I think we need that now more than ever. So I think getting rid of the Johnson Amendment is a colossally bad idea. And yet the Trump administration seems determined to do that.
Maybe it's just my age and the political environment that I've been alive for. I'd be hard pressed to find a church that I have attended for any amount of time that didn't have obvious political leanings. Like that seems inevitable to me.
No,
So
I think, yes. And the other problem is that the IRS has been notoriously lax in enforcing the Johnson Amendment. So I think you're right. And, just to be honest and fair about it, the black church tradition would probably be the most obvious example of that sort of thing. And yet still, I think doing away with it entirely would just be a terrible idea.
Well, and that was where I lost part of my faith, at least in the church, was that I was on staff in a white church and I was playing gospel music in a black church. And I heard on Sunday morning about how obviously, like, we're not going to say any names around here, maybe occasionally accidentally, but, obviously like a good Christian person and a good Christian leader looks like this. And then on Sunday night, I would go to play music and hear, well, obviously a good Christian person. Okay. Like, we don't have to use names here. It's pretty obvious. And so, at that point, I'm like, wait, hang on. Either you guys can't both be good Christian people, or maybe it's not so obvious who's the good guy and who's the villain. So,
somebody's got his signals crossed. Yeah,
right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think, and right. I just, for these organizations, ever since the Johnson Amendment was passed in 1954, this is a good deal, right? And what people forget in these conversations is that tax exemption is a form of public subsidy. Hello. When churches or educational institutions, my own college, right? When they don't pay taxes, everybody else in the community has to pay a little bit more. It's a form of public subsidy. And since 1954, churches, religious organizations have recognized this is a pretty good deal. I get public subsidy for my organization. In return, I simply cannot make a political endorsement through my organization. That's a pretty damn, if you pardon the French here, good deal. And now all of a sudden, and really it was, it's the pressure is coming from the religious right. They're saying, well, we want our cake and eat it too, right? We want our tax deduction and we want to be able to make political endorsements. And it's just a colossally bad idea.
Yeah. Well, and you can make political endorsements. You just can't be, you can still be a church. You can call yourself a church. You can be the exact same organization.
Absolutely.
And just say, you know what? I feel called to endorse this political candidate, so we're not going to do a tax-exempt thing. We're not going to make people subsidize our organization. Bam, you got
simple. Very simple. Very simple. Well, it's too good a deal. They don't want to pass it up. So,
right.
They won't do it.
Well, I feel like there's a lot more we could talk about, but I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining me today and talking through all this.
I'm happy to do it. I'll be happy to do it again sometime. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. I'm sure I'll take you up on that. Thanks.
All right. Good. All right. Take care.
Thank you all for joining me. Just for this episode, I put together a timeline of evangelicalism and American politics that's available in the blog post linked in the description. This actually all connects to my upcoming episode on how to be evangelical and gay affirming with Randall Balmer. So make sure you're subscribed so you get notified when that drops. And I hope it's evident that I put considerable effort into these things to give them to you for free. So if you would click a couple buttons and give me something for free, then we can keep this good thing going between us. And if you really want to show your support and become a super fan, then follow the link in the description for more free ways to show your support and keep this love train rolling. Be well, my distant cousins. I'm rooting for you, and you should too.